Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're venturing into the often unsettling landscapes of dystopian literature. These are the futures that, prompt us to reflect on our present, maybe even with a bit of a shudder.
Absolutely. And we're really going to dissect what makes a dystopia tick, looking at the historical currents that propelled the genre and those visionary, sometimes pretty unnerving worlds created by giants like Huxley, Orwell, and Bradbury. Our exploration is mainly grounded in an academic analysis of the genre, but we'll weave in insights on these key authors too.
Yeah, and we'll also get into Bradbury's style specifically, drawing from a really lively discussion we saw online, and also probe those recurring kind of mind-bending themes in Philip K. Dick's work, another huge figure in speculative fiction. So the goal here is for you to get a really solid grasp of dystopian fiction, what it is, where it came from, its power, and the key voices. Okay, let's unpack this.
Right. So to really get dystopia, it helps to start with its opposite. Utopia. This idea, it really took off with Sir Thomas More's Utopia back in 1516. He depicted this, well, seemingly perfect society, an ideal socio-political legal setup, the dream of a flawless social order,
Yeah,
a better way of life.
the perfect place, right. And we've seen different takes on that, like Robert Heinlein's Libertarian, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, or William Morris's Socialist, News from Nowhere. But, like our source points out, while those perfect visions are out there, it's often the flawed futures, the
Yeah.
dystopias, that really grab us and, well, stick with us.
That's a really key point. Dystopian fiction, as the paper defines it, gives us this negative view of society's future, of humankind's future. Unlike utopias, where tech often makes life better, in dystopias, technological progress frequently leads to oppression, control. It's quite different. And the term dystopia itself, it started gaining traction in the late 19th century, though even before that, you had these cataclysmic writers, as they're called. Very pessimistic outlook. They feared the pace of change, technology's potential for destruction, apocalyptic stuff even.
So these were the kind of original doom and gloom folks, seeing progress as dangerous. And here's where it gets really interesting. The 20th century, with all its chaos, seems like it was just incredibly fertile ground for these stories, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. The academic source we looked at points straight to the grim realities of the Nazi era, the Stalinist era, all the wars, totalitarian regimes popping up. These events, they provided powerful real-world fuel for the anxieties explored in dystopian fiction. Like Bernard Richards said, dystopias are useful. They warn us about what might happen. They force us to think about liberty, individual will versus the state, and how technology can be a double-edged sword, often for the worse.
And speaking of worse, what are some of those recurring nightmares, the common threads we see in these dystopian worlds?
Well, our source analysis flags a few big ones. One is humanity trying to master nature, but it backfires. You get barren landscapes or nature actually turns against people. Another is technology, not liberating, but enslaving, used for rigid control over people's lives. Then there's the society itself, often split into these strict castes or groups, fixed roles, no moving, and a really unsettling one. The loss of collective memory, of history, makes people easier to manipulate, leads to dehumanization.
Dehumanization, yeah, that feels like such a core element, doesn't it? It really gets to why these stories feel so profoundly disturbing. And the paper goes on to break down some specific features we see again and again.
Indeed. Often you see a very rigid hierarchy, a caste system you just can't break out of. Propaganda is key, and the education system is designed purely to keep that caste system going. Individuality, oh, it's discouraged or just stamped out completely. You might get symbols presented like they're religious truths, but they're really just hiding what the state is up to. Constant surveillance, state police watching everything. That's another classic element. And often there's a backstory, some disaster or war that supposedly justifies why society had to change so dramatically, so oppressively. And almost always you have a main character, a protagonist, who starts to doubt it all, to question things. Oh, and of course, more advanced tech. But usually, it's tech used for control.
Okay, so that's kind of the blueprint for dystopia. Now let's dive into some of the architects, the writers who really mastered this. Our source points to Huxley, Orwell, Zamyatin as foundational. And Ray Bradbury definitely needs to be in this conversation. Let's kick things off with Huxley's Brave New World.
Right. Brave New World, 1932. It's just a perfect example of a dystopia built on biology and psychology. It's interesting, unlike his later novel Island, which was more hopeful, here Huxley shows humanity becoming Well, less human because of tech. People aren't born, they're decanted, cloned in the hatchery, conditioned from infancy to fit into their caste, from the intellectual alphas down to the epsilons doing manual labor. What Huxley did so brilliantly was portray a dystopia not of obvious boot-on-the-face oppression like Orwell, but one of, like, engineered contentment. It's insidious.
It's a world where even birth is totally controlled, right? Things like the Bokanovsky process for mass cloning identical humans and hypnopedia, sleep teaching to drum in those societal values and class roles. Plus all the distractions, the feelies, those sensory movies, and Soma, the drug that keeps everyone mellow and happy, superficially happy. Anything.
Precisely. And what's really sharp in Huxley's vision is this critique of progress. The world state boasts about science, but its real goal is technological control. Genuine science, the search for truth, that's suppressed. Because questioning things is a threat to stability. They push the feelies, the superficial stuff, over real experience or curiosity. It raises that big question, doesn't it? Is a society that happily trades real emotion and freedom for comfort and stability, is that its own kind of dystopia?
Yeah. Now fast forward a bit to Orwell, 1984, 1949. Such a stark, chilling vision. This feels like a dystopia built on something different. More about twisting information and constant watching.
That's a crucial difference, yeah. Orwell gives us this future England totally under the boot of Big Brother, constant surveillance. The Ministry of Truth actively rewrites history, controls every scrap of information, personal freedom, basically gone. The party's grip is total. And Winston Smith, the protagonist, he tries to rebel, but, well, he's just crushed by the state's power. It's a terrifying warning about totalitarianism, about suppressing thought. Orwell's genius was showing how controlling language itself through newspeak could actually limit people's ability to think dissenting thoughts.
And our source also brings up Yevgeny Zamyatin's We, which was actually earlier, 1924. Sounds like another key work exploring that individual versus collective tension.
Absolutely, Zamyatin's We. It's foundational, really. It shows a society where individuality is just dissolved. People are numbers, not names. They live in this city made of glass, total transparency, lives run by mathematical schedules. Nature is walled off. And the protagonist, D503, his emerging imagination and a forbidden love affair start to chip away at his loyalty to this rigid system. It's a really powerful early look at how crushing creativity and individuality for the sake of the collective is, well, dehumanizing.
And then Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah.
Such an iconic image, burning books to kill critical thought. A powerful statement on losing knowledge, enforcing conformity. Now, that online discussion about Bradbury we mentioned had some fascinating takes on his writing style. What stood out to you there?
What's really striking with Bradbury is how he mixes speculative ideas with this incredibly unique, almost poetic voice. The discussion nailed it, highlighting his lyrical, atmospheric writing, often nostalgic, melancholic, but also really evocative, dreamlike. There's this sense of the fantastic just woven into everyday life, you know?
Yeah, someone described it beautifully, mentioning his great evocative metaphors that are almost painting or poem references. And I gave that amazing example from Dandelion Wine. Eyes peering like sentinels through the portcullis of a strange castle out along a bridge. Wow, that paints a picture.
It really does. And others pointed out how grounded his descriptions of normal life are, comparing him to Sherwood Anderson. He had this knack for capturing a kind of uncanny American feel, especially in small towns. You can see his influence on things like Stranger Things or Stephen King's writing. It's that familiar but slightly off reality he creates.
Right, that folksy storyteller vibe, as someone put it. They also mentioned the variety in his chapter openings, his less linear approach. It's definitely a style that's hard to pin down.
Exactly. As one person summed it up, he was a poet at heart, using sci-fi as a frame to explore deep human emotions and societal worries. Maybe not always hard sci-fi in the strictest sense, but his language, those metaphors, made his dystopias hit harder emotionally.
How do you think that dreamlike quality adds to the unsettling feel of his dystopias?
That's a great point. I think maybe blurring that line between the real and the fantastic makes the dangers feel both immediate and somehow faded, like a bad dream leaking into reality.
Okay, let's shift focus now to another giant, Philip K. Dick. His work often hangs right on the edge of dystopia. Our sources really stress his deep dives into the nature of reality itself and how slippery personal identity can be.
Philip K. Dick, yeah, he's known for stories that constantly question what we think is real. He was really into philosophy and came to believe our existence is based on our internal perception, which, might not actually match up with any objective external reality, this constant questioning what is really real. That's core PKD.
So the world we think we're in could just be a construct, an illusion, maybe shared, maybe just ours. That definitely sounds like a recipe for some unsettling stuff, which fits, right? His stories often feature alternate universes, simulacra, things that aren't what they seem.
Exactly. And Ursula K. Le Guin made this really interesting point about his work. She said, you don't find many traditional heroes in Dick's stories. Instead, heroism shows up in the integrity, the kindness, the patience of ordinary working people, not the elites, not the powerful figures. That focus on everyday humanity facing bizarre realities is pretty unique.
That's fascinating. It grounds his really wild concepts in something relatable. And Dick himself was obsessed with that question. What makes someone authentically human?
Yes, big time. He explored it constantly. In Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, for example, you have beings that look perfectly human but might lack empathy, while maybe artificial characters show more genuine human connection. For Dick, being human wasn't just biology. It was about how you engage with the world, compassion, empathy for all life, whatever its form. He often showed a lack of empathy as a sign of becoming machine-like, just like his androids.
It's interesting how that loops back to that dehumanization theme we talked about earlier with the broader dystopian tropes. Now, Dick wrote a ton. Can you highlight a few key works that really lean into these dystopian or reality-bending themes?
Sure. Well, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? The basis for Blade Runner is essential. Set on a dying Earth, blurring lines between human and artificial, making you ask what human even means. Then there's Ubik, truly mind-bending. Reality itself is eroding. Themes of death, memory, perception being manipulated. It's a trip. Flow My Tears, the policeman said, that paints a really bleak picture of a dystopian police state. A celebrity suddenly finds his identity erased. He just doesn't exist anymore officially. And Scanner Darkly, super paranoid, chilling. Near-future California, rampant drug use, constant surveillance leads to the total breakdown of self and reality.
Wow. They all sound incredibly intense, leaving you with that feeling that reality is just
Yeah.
unreliable, fragile.
That's the hallmark of his genius, really. He built these worlds where the very ground beneath the character's feet feels like it's shifting, dissolving, reflecting his own deep questions about what's real.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into dystopian literature, it's clear it's way more than just dark stories, isn't it? It's this powerful way of reflecting critically, projecting our current fears and trends onto possible futures.
Precisely. We've sort of touched on the core elements, those negative future visions, the common themes like tech control, loss of individuality, and how it keeps acting as this commentary on power and where society might be going.
And we've really seen the impact of writers like Huxley, Orwell, Bradbury, and Dick in shaping how we even imagine these futures, each with their own distinct voice and warning.
Right. And their work still hits home because it taps into these basic human fears about control, about losing ourselves, about where progress might lead us if we're not careful. They really serve as powerful cautionary tales, pushing us to think critically about the path we're on now.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, listening. Considering everything we've talked about today and all those elements of dystopia and looking at our world now with technology and society constantly changing, what trends do you find most concerning? What aspects of today feel like they could potentially nudge us closer to one of those futures we've been discussing? It's definitely worth thinking about the power these fictional worlds have, not just to entertain us with dark visions, but maybe, just maybe, to wake us up a bit to the issue